My father's message arrived at 6:12 a.m., when the house was still wrapped in that pale, breathless dawn light. I remember because the coffee machine hadn't finished its first groan yet, and the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cold metal. His words were short, clipped, almost official. We've all decided to stay away from the family. No greeting. No warmth. Just a verdict dressed up as a decision. I sat at the counter in my worn gray hoodie, phone resting in my palm like something fragile that might shatter if I squeezed too hard. Outside, sprinklers ticked along the lawn in a steady rhythm, as if nothing inside me was unraveling. I typed back one word, understood, and hit send before I could overthink it. My name is Trevor Bennett, and for years I'd been the quiet one, the son who built things instead of arguing about them. I'd poured my savings, my reputation, and my sleepless nights into a new office building project that everyone claimed would keep us together. That morning, with my father's text still glowing on the screen, I opened my banking app and withdrew every dollar I had invested. 48 hours later, my mother was crying in the driveway, mascara streaking her cheeks while she clutched her phone. My brother paced the porch shouting about lawyers. Then a message came from the developer. Your leave destroyed our funding. I felt something sharpen inside me, not anger but clarity. I smiled, thumb hovering over the keyboard, and realized the next word would change my life. The house felt different after I sent that smile to the screen, quieter as if the walls themselves were listening. I stayed in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. The sprinkler outside clicked, paused, clicked again. Ordinary sounds that suddenly felt unbearable. My mother called 3 times. I didn't pick up. Instead, I watched steam curl off the coffee like a thin ghost, thinking about every meeting where I'd nodded along, every promise I'd funded with silence instead of boundaries. I kept seeing my father's message in my mind, not as cruelty but as permission to finally step back. A knock hit the door around noon. My brother stood there, tie loose, eyes frantic, sweat beading at his hairline. He didn't hug me. He didn't apologize. He said, "You have to fix this." I leaned against the doorway and noticed the small crack in the paint I'd never seen before. Funny what grief makes you notice. I told him calmly that I already had. He laughed, sharp, panicked, then pulled out his phone to threaten lawyers again. His voice echoed through my hallway, bouncing off pictures of a family that hadn't felt like mine in years. When he finally left, the house sank back into that hollow quiet. I walked upstairs, opened my old desk drawer, and found the contract I'd signed months ago, the one no one else had bothered to read carefully. I folded it once, slowly, like I was folding away my past. Because I wasn't just pulling money from a building. I was pulling myself from a story that had never truly been mine. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling fan, watching it carve slow circles through the darkness. Every rotation felt like another memory passing over me. Birthday dinners where my brother spoke and I disappeared, family photos where I was always placed at the edge, conversations that ended whenever I tried to be honest. At 2:17 a.m., I got up and walked barefoot through the house. The wooden floor was cool, grounding, almost merciful. In my father's study, dust floated through a single beam of streetlight, and I noticed the framed photo of all of us from 10 years ago. I was smiling, but my hands were clenched at my sides like I was bracing for impact. I opened my laptop at the dining table and reread the developer's message. Your leave destroyed our funding. The sentence felt heavier than any accusation my family had thrown at me. Yet beneath it, I sensed something else, proof that I had mattered far more than they ever admitted. At dawn, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't family. It was an architect I'd worked with years ago, asking quietly if I was still interested in that independent project we once sketched on a napkin. I stepped outside, breath visible in the crisp morning air, and looked across the empty street. For the first time in years, no one was telling me who to be. I typed back a single word, yes. And as the sun crept over the rooftops, I realized I hadn't just withdrawn my money, I had begun to withdraw my obedience. By afternoon, the house felt too small for the thoughts crowding my chest. I drove with the windows down, letting the dry California wind slap against my face, carrying the smell of asphalt and eucalyptus. Traffic blurred into streaks of color, and for once I didn't feel trapped inside my own head. I parked near the half-finished office building, the project that was supposed to unite us. Yellow tape fluttered around steel beams like anxious flags. A lone crane stood frozen against a cloudless sky, and the skeleton of the structure looked suddenly fragile, almost lonely. The developer met me there, jaw tight, hands jammed into his pockets. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "They pushed you into this, didn't they?" I stared at the concrete dust on my shoes instead of answering. He handed me a stack of documents I'd never seen before. Emails, amendments, side deals my brother had approved without telling me. Each page felt heavier than the last. In that moment, the story I'd been told about loyalty cracked open, revealing something colder beneath. Driving home, I stopped at a small diner we used to visit as kids. The booth vinyl was split, coffee tasted burnt, and the waitress called me honey without knowing my name. I sat there longer than necessary, listening to the clink of plates and low murmur of strangers living ordinary lives. When I finally pulled into my driveway at dusk, my father's car was waiting. Headlights off. Engine silent. I walked toward him slowly, aware that the distance between us was no longer just physical, and I knew the next conversation would either bind me again, or set me free. My father didn't get out of the car right away. He sat behind the wheel with his hands locked at 10 and 2, like he was still trying to steer a situation that had already run off the road. The porch light buzzed above us, flickering, and for a moment the night felt like a held breath. When he finally stepped out, gravel crunched under his shoes, a sound that used to feel comforting when I was a kid, waiting for him to come home from work. Now it sounded like something closing behind me. He began with my name, not gently, not angrily, carefully, as if he was testing whether it still belonged to him. He said the family was under pressure, that decisions had been made in haste, that no one meant to cut me out. I let him speak without interrupting. I watched the way his eyes avoided mine, landing instead on the dark windows of my house, the unmowed grass, the mailbox I hadn't checked in days. When he finished, I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain the documents, the emails, or the quiet ways I'd been sidelined for years. I simply asked one question. If I'd written that message to you, would you have accepted it with one word? Silence stretched between us, thicker than the night. A car passed at the end of the street, headlights slicing across his face. For the first time I saw uncertainty there, not as a father but as a man who'd miscalculated. I turned toward my front door, key already in hand. Behind me, my father exhaled like something had slipped permanently out of his grasp, and I realized I was no longer walking away in pain. I was walking forward on purpose. The next morning, I woke before my alarm, not with dread, but with an unfamiliar lightness in my chest. Sun spilled across the bedroom floor in thin golden lines, dust dancing quietly in the warmth. I stood there a long time, just breathing, as if learning how to exist without someone else's expectations pressing down on me. I drove downtown to meet the architect from years ago. His office smelled like paper, coffee, and pine wood. Rolls of blueprints were stacked like quiet promises along the walls. He didn't ask why I'd stepped back from my family. He simply spread out a fresh set of plans and slid a pen toward me. As we talked, I felt a version of myself I hadn't known in years, curious, steady, not defensive. I noticed small things. The way sunlight hit the drafting table, the soft scratch of pencil on paper, the hum of traffic far below us. On my way home, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother, a long message about responsibility, loyalty, and what I owed. I read it at a red light, hands loose on the wheel, heart strangely calm. When I pulled into my driveway, my mother's car sat at the curb. She was waiting by my mailbox, purse clenched like armor. For a moment I almost turned around. Instead, I cut the engine, stepped onto the warm pavement and walked toward her, not as the son who always folded, but as a man choosing his own ground. And I knew, standing there under the open sky, that this meeting would either pull me back into the old pattern, or prove that I had truly stepped out of it. My mother spoke before I reached her. Her voice carried that familiar trembling softness, the one that used to make me rush to protect her. She said the family was falling apart, that my withdrawal had embarrassed them, that people were asking questions she didn't know how to answer. I stood beside the mailbox, feeling the sun heat the metal against my fingertips. I could smell cut grass from a neighbor's yard, hear a dog barking somewhere down the block, and for the first time those ordinary sounds felt like shelter instead of noise. She stepped closer, eyes glossy, searching my face for the boy who used to apologize just to keep the peace. "You don't understand what this is doing to us," she whispered. I understood more than she realized. I told her calmly that I hadn't broken anything, I had only stopped holding up a structure that was never stable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list the years I'd been invisible. I simply spoke in the same measured tone she'd used countless times when asking me to be patient. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. Behind her, a delivery truck rolled slowly down the street, reversing with a sharp beep, small, persistent, impossible to ignore. It felt like a reminder that life moves forward whether families do or not. Finally she let go. As she drove away, I watched her taillights disappear at the corner and felt something unexpected settle inside me. Not relief, not bitterness, but a quiet steadiness. Because I realized the real turning point was already behind me, and what waited ahead was no longer theirs to shape. 3 weeks later, I stood alone inside an empty warehouse with sunlight spilling through high dusty windows. The space smelled like old concrete, rain, and possibility, nothing like the polished office tower my family had fought over. Rolls of blueprints were spread across a folding table. My architect stood at the far wall, quietly sketching while I paced, listening to my own footsteps echo. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew without looking who it was. My father wrote that the developer had pulled out completely. My brother's lawyers were exploring options. My mother said the house felt unbearably quiet. Their messages carried panic dressed up as concern, urgency wrapped in guilt. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked to the center of the warehouse and looked up. A single beam of light cut through the air like a clean line, illuminating dust that drifted slowly, weightless. For the first time in years, I felt that same light inside me. That afternoon, I signed a new lease, not for a tower that proved loyalty, but for a place that reflected me. A community workspace, open, humble, built for collaboration rather than control. My own project on my own terms. At sunset, I finally answered my father. I wrote only this. I didn't leave to punish you. I left to find myself again. I have. Hours later, my mother called. Her voice trembled, but this time I didn't rush to rescue her. I simply listened. And in that quiet distance, something gentler than revenge settled between us. The painful, irreversible clarity that sometimes losing control is the only way family learns what you were worth all along.